And if you can, sorry, Brian, if you all can mute when you're not speaking, it will eliminate any background noise. Good morning, and we are so delighted at the 14th Annual Connecting Faith and Business Summit to have this incredible fireside chat with the SBA Administrator, Isabel Casillas Guzman, and Three Keys Coffee and Pastor Evan. And you're going to meet these incredible people in a little bit. We had a conversation, I had a conversation with the administrator some weeks ago, and we were talking about connecting faith and business. And she said to me, there is a group you need to meet who has done this in such an inspirational way, this being connecting faith and business. She said, you have to meet this group, Three Keys Coffee, and you have to hear their story about how they partnered with a church. And so I think we should have a fireside chat about it. And I said, well, that sounds wonderful. Let's do it. You all know the SBA administrator for her incredible leadership in during the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, and this historic role to be able to create emergency programs for businesses all over the country, and to do so quick, on point, and really concerned about the needs of businesses and the families that those businesses represent. I can't even get into all of the numbers. Maybe she will share some about the work that they did with PPP and IDLE and the restaurant revitalization program. And really it's through those connections that she met Three Keys Coffee principal Kenzel Fallon and heard her story. I am so grateful for the work that AMPAC is able to do with the U.S. Small Business Administration. And I'm so grateful for this administrator who is a woman of her word. I've seen her in action. She does what she says, and she's so committed to the growth and the thriving of small businesses. So in this fireside chat, you'll hear more from the administrator, but you'll meet both a pastor and a business owner who've done phenomenal in connecting faith and business. And with that, I'd like to introduce and present Isabel Casillas Guzman.
Thank you so much, my dear friend, Hilda Kennedy, who I've had the pleasure of working with for some time, when my first stint at the SBA years ago, but as well in California, where I was when the pandemic hit, and had to get creative on the ground with our businesses to make sure that they could survive the pandemic. And now, as my role as the SBA administrator, I'm committed at a national level to trying to ensure that small businesses have the tools that they need, the resources that they need to start and grow and build resilient businesses in this country. And I like to say that our main focus really is in meeting businesses where they are to help them achieve that American dream of business ownership, which is so impactful in the communities that they occupy. And so, with our small business leaders, we found during COVID, I think what was one of the great silver linings is how they came together as a community, as they always do. They support their neighborhoods, they support their communities. And more and more people became aware of the fact that they are the job creators. They create 2/3 of net new jobs. They employ half our workforce. Oftentimes, it's our first job is working within a small business. And I know, their leadership in communities is really what helps advance and build wealth and build community. And so I think connecting faith and businesses is just such an important thing to do. And the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives at the SBA, of course, is a long-standing office, and we've been committed to ensuring that we can build bridges to faith communities to ensure that entrepreneurship can thrive across this country. So I was really excited when I was able to travel to Houston. I travel around the country on a regular basis to meet with our small business owners, especially those who have had to get creative and innovative during the pandemic. pandemic to pivot their businesses and adapt, as you will see in our great study today with Three Keys Coffee. Hilda and the AMPAC team have just been incredible in helping us in that journey as well. It's through SBA's incredible lending networks around the country that we're able to fund and help power these great small businesses like Three Keys Coffee. And we know that, those entrepreneurs are the ones that have to be so agile and creative and adaptive and find ways to make their businesses happen, which is what Three Keys did in working with First Lutheran Church, and why this story is so admirable, because instead of being blocked by a barrier, a financial barrier or place barrier, they were able to overcome by partnering with the local church to ensure that their business plan could be successful. So I'm just excited to be here, Hilda, as well with Pastor Evan and Kenzel, just to hear more about their successes, but as well just to take this as an example for our faith-based communities around the country to be innovative in how you support economic development in your communities, as that as a whole really helps lift up all of your community members in a way that's so impactful and long-standing. So excited to be here and part of this conversation.
That is so wonderful. Well, let's introduce the star of the hour, or the stars of the hour. And we'll start with you, Kenzel. Tell us a little bit about your incredible story. And as you tell us about your story and getting started, I was so struck by how you came to the decision to reach out to the church, having a husband who's the grandson of a pastor. So please tell us a little bit more about how you started and how you got connected to Pastor Evan.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hilda. Also, thank you, Administrator Guzman, for having me here today. I'm Kenzel Fallon, one of the co-founders, along with my husband, of Three Keys Coffee in Houston, Texas. We were founded on paper, I'll say, at the end of 2019. But when we were looking for an actual physical space in which to operate our business outside of our home, that was started in the early 2020, which of course was right as the pandemic was starting. And being a startup, a lot of options that were available to us were very expensive. We did not have the initial capital to cover, long-term leases. Being a coffee roasting business, it's considered food manufacturing. And so we needed to have a space that would allow us to be permitted from a health and food perspective. As we were having these conversations, my husband, who is from Atlanta, and his grandfather was the pastor of the church. I say was, he has unfortunately passed away since then. And we would say, I wish we could just put the roaster, our coffee roaster, in the church. We have a church, the kitchen is there, but it was in Atlanta, and here we are in Houston. But it did get our ideas going in terms of, maybe we need to think out of the box as we're looking for spaces in which to operate our business. So as we were doing some research and looking into what was around us, we came across actually a listing that Pastor Evan had in trying to seek potential tenants for a renovation that he was seeking to do in the church kitchen at First Lutheran. It felt very much like divine intervention. In a sense, we lived just maybe about 3 or 4 minutes from the church, met with Pastor Evan, shared our story in terms of what we were looking for, and it ended up being something that we could see as a very mutually beneficial situation. We were needing a space that could be food permitted. The church had a kitchen that it was in the process of renovating, but just needed to have a solid tenant who would be able to sign on, for a lease to make it worth it. And so we actually started, I believe it might have been February of 2020, Pastor Evan, somewhere around that time, or March or so, right smack in the middle of the pandemic, right? I always anecdotally like to kind of joke about, again, how serendipitous the whole thing was. And even our name being Three Keys Coffee, I felt like the Trinity led us to the church as our starting point. It very much was something that, we were needing as a startup business to be able to grow our business without having to incur so much initial financial capital.
Wow, that is really, really exciting. So, Pastor Evan, I am a pastor's wife, and I know this audience is really curious about how this happened. The fact that you had advertised this space and then you brought it to the church. How did that go? Please share that journey.
Well, it took a while. We actually had a serendipitous meeting with a guy who works with food trucks, like probably 2016 or so. And he saw these kitchen spaces we had, that one of which was a total, where the roaster is now, it was a total disaster. Water damage all over the place. There was nothing in it, not a single sink or anything. It was total. We just use it for storage, and not even storing nice things, storing terrible things that we didn't care about anymore. And he said, if you turn these into like commissary kitchens or prep kitchens, I could give you a bunch of food truck guys that need prep space for what they do. And so that kind of got the wheels turning, and we started crunching some numbers, and it took a long time to get architectural plans and a contractor and all of that. So it took several years, and we kind of were deciding whether we want to take out a loan ourselves to, renovate the kitchens, or we could just kind of handle it in house and kind of bear down and do it. But long story short, we ended up adopting a model of kind of a cold kitchen, really in part because Three Keys came to us and said, we don't need a vent hood, and a vent hood and a grease trap, not to get too in the weeds, but that's going to trigger 60 grand right there. If you're going to do that in a commercial kitchen, it's not a cheap process. So we said, okay, well, we could have a tenant, where they don't need those things because they're just roasting beans. They have their own ventilation system. And it just kind of started this idea. And then we did put an ad out, and we heard from other people who also had the same kind of ability where they could be in a kitchen. They needed to be in a commercial kitchen, but they didn't need to cook. So like sandwich makers, I talked to someone who was going to make ceviche, juicers, ice cream makers. There's a lot of people out there who don't need, that expense of a cooking kitchen. And so we kind of saw a business model that would work. It is a shared space. Kinzel and Tio are great about sharing the space with other tenants, sometimes at the same time, but generally shared in terms of people keep their stuff there and all of that. So yeah, it just kind of came together where we put it out there. We had a space that met, the health codes and all of that. And ended up being mutually, beneficial. So yeah, just, I think people saw the potential, and they saw it was a space that was literally not being used. And that's the thing about churches. We have a lot of unused space where we have people on Sunday morning and maybe another night during the week. But then there are all these other spaces. And that's would be my encouragement to other churches, is think about, do you have spaces that just aren't being used anymore, that a small business could get in there and use them, and now it's a mutual benefit. They can start without paying maybe the commercial high-end price. But hey, it was an unused space before. So, it might take some investment, but if you can look 3 to 5 or 10 years down the road, it's money you weren't going to be making. So yeah.
So Administrator, you were telling me some things that you learned about Kenzel. You want to ask her a little bit about that, or talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm happy to. I think it's one of my joys as a daughter of a small business owner, and having started multiple businesses myself. I know how challenging it is to start, first off, and then to continue to figure out how to operate most efficiently so that you're always tracking your bottom line and that you're able to grow and scale. I think that businesses that have the strongest balance sheets right now are the ones who are able to be successful through, the COVID pandemic and everything, the twists and turns that it's thrown at us in terms of the economic impacts that are still lasting today. So I think with Kenzo, I was just so impressed, obviously coming from a very strong background as well, with some experience, but coming to the table as an entrepreneur, ready to just be creative and innovative. But, I think one thing that we know that beyond that skill and ingenuity and that can-do spirit that we see in our entrepreneurs, there's also a need for investment in our entrepreneurs. And that's what the SBA is all about. We're here to help the private sector, our lending network, get to yes more easily by giving the backing of the federal government to support lending and investments in communities across the country. And, with Kenzo, she was able to leverage SBA's programs in capital to get her go. And I think, hear it in stories around the country. Pastor Evan mentioned ice cream. I think about Jenny's Ice Cream, who also started with a small dollar SBA loan and created her first bricks and mortar location to then, launch obviously in her great success today with multiple locations, around the country. And we see this time and time again that, a little bit of seed capital in the beginning can really make a difference in the small businesses' scalability and ability to create jobs and create economic output for our country. So, Kenzo, I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about how SBA has been able to help you envision a more, lasting long-term future, and as well, to help fund your plans for growth and scale into the future.
Yes, absolutely. So we we're grateful to be recipients of an EIDL grant, as well as SBA 7A loan funding. And so that equipped us with the capital that we needed to just be a little bit more flexible and pursue other areas of growth by expanding our team, increasing efficiencies in how we were operating. And I'm really proud to say that now 3 Keys Coffee has been shipped out to every state in the country. We have gone from our tiny, kitchen in the church and have shared our coffee across the country. We've also even supplied to Trader Joe's. And so you can find 3 Keys Coffee in over 40 Trader Joe's locations. And so what we have been able to do with having, access to that space, and that facility and in partnering with First Lutheran, as well as from being recipients of grant and low cost loan funding through the SBA, that has allowed our business to grow and reach areas and people that we certainly never would have anticipated when we started our business.
And Kenzo is being very modest because everyone knows who's been to Trader Joe's that it's just Trader Joe's coffee that's usually on their shelves, but they were able to sell to Trader Joe's. Tell us about that.
I did forget to mention one little thing that that was another big deal for us, but actually Food and Wine Magazine this year named 3 Keys Coffee the best roaster in Texas. So that was also another really great honor that we received, and are happy again that, we always thought that our business maybe would just be like a nice little hobby, a little side project, but it was clear that it had the potential to be so much more. And so we're grateful that we were able to invest the time and the energy in a way that we were not overextending and overstretching ourselves, that we can actually, see the business grow and reach these heights. So very much appreciative to both Pastor Evan and the SBA for how you all have assisted our business.
That's wonderful. Well, we know that every entrepreneur needs a team, and this is a beautiful example of how the local church with Pastor Evan, as well as the SBA, the federal government, were able to better incentivize entrepreneurship and better support entrepreneurship that really has an impact in community.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really love that story. And for the Connecting Faith and Business audience, and for those who just thought they had a side hustle, I hope you see your possibilities and look for those possibilities in areas that you may not have thought about. Is the church that you're attending able to do something, create a partnership that's a little bit more than you ever dreamed of. And so with that, Pastor, what other businesses have utilized the church? What other things is the church doing in terms of incubating businesses and maybe even partnering with the SBA?
Sure. Well, we years ago, my wife, really just her, started our Mother's Day Out program. So we have a preschool 2 days a week. And we have a number of other nonprofits that use our space as well. So singing clubs. We have a dance group that does international dance, every Friday night. They put on like Hungarian folk music and, dance in circles, every Friday night, and they clear out a room for that. We have another church that's here. So there are lots of organizations out there that do need space. And we're lucky, we're in Houston. Not every church is in a metropolitan area. So it can be different. If you're in a really rural area, it might be a different context for those churches. But yeah, there have been lots of different groups that needed space. And we've worked with them. I mean, like the Swedish Club has an annual big celebration on St. Lucia Day. I think it's like December 15th every year. So, that weekend they always have an event. We host things like that. So I would say, yeah, just keep your eyes open and kind of try to get a sense of what the need is, in the community, and be willing to be a community participant. I think one of the struggles for churches and for pastors is we all want to be superstar preachers where people bang down the door to hear us preach on a Sunday morning, and we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. None of this business outreach or community outreach. We don't have to do any of that because we've got, lots of people to keep us fully funded. And, you have to swallow your ego a little bit and your pride a little bit and say, we may be living in times where churches need to be sort of community centers. And, it's not just going to be Sunday morning and other church activities. That's just the reality of the times in which we live. And I feel like not being in denial of that. I don't know how many churches are closing every week in America. I've seen number 10, 20 churches a week. I'd like to reverse that trend. And I think churches being community centers is a way to do that.
Wow, that's really inspirational. Thank you so much, Pastor. As we wrap up, it's Administrator Guzman. I just love this innovation in connecting faith and business. You have opened up a practical opportunity for how this can happen. And it so aligns with our vision for connecting faith and business. How do we see it practically living out and the success that it can provide? And this public-private partnership between and government partnership between the church, the SBA, small business, it just works. I really, really appreciate everyone's time. I will close here and ask the administrator to give us final wrap-up remarks. I am so excited and so pumped up about what you're doing. Thank you so much, Kenzel. Thank you so much, Pastor Evan. What a great conversation. Administrator Guzman.
Well, I've been excited to be here with you all, and Hilda and the entire team at AMPAC really appreciate the great work that you do in funding small businesses, helping realize those American dreams, but as well your commitment to continually helping us improve our outreach and connection to communities around this country. Obviously for small businesses who individually, have a huge impact in their neighborhoods and their communities, we want to see that ambition and resilience just thrive around the country. And we think that the connection with great community leaders and faith-based leaders is a pathway forward to ensuring that we can power up our small businesses around this country. It's thinking locally. It's remembering those founders on shopping days. It's trying to be innovative in the way that we fund and support our small businesses and communities around this country. So I'm very pleased to hear this success story and thankful for both Kinzel and her wonderful team at Three Keys Coffee, as well as Pastor Evans and his team. This is another example of innovation in America and the commitment towards making sure that our entrepreneurs have spaces and support that they need to continue to thrive into the future. So I'm excited for SBA's role in this small business and the ability to continue to power great stories of growth like this in America. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.